Join our podcast conversations as we share ideas, insights, and information that will educate, inform, and inspire. We will blend our knowledge of online safety and emotional awareness to help you have a better understanding of your kids' online world and their emotional responses and well-being.
Sarah, good to see you.
Great to see you, Paul.
Summer's over. Well, no, technically
Well,
it's not. You know how everyone says back to school in the summer? There's 3 more weeks left of summer. Let's think about that. It's just back to school. Anyways, here we are on the first day of back to school, recording our next podcast.
yes, and I'm excited about this. And I think this really flows in with back to school, which is how will a social media contract create conversations between you and your child about online safety and being responsible when it comes to being online? And that's a big shift, I think, when it comes to the transition of summer holiday and school. You have more time usually over summer holiday to be online, to use your tech. Now, during school, of course, you're using it, but in other ways. So having a contract, I like when you posted about this on Facebook. It was like, okay, this is about creating clear expectations. This is about having conversations that are really important that I believe a lot of us can just breeze over the fact of sitting down and being really detailed about these important conversations.
Mm-hmm. What was great about creating this contract is that it was requested by my Facebook audience. So I threw it out there. I said, parents, would you be interested in a contract for social media? It was the most liked Facebook post I've ever had, over 1,000 likes, and I only have an audience of 23,500. And I thought, okay, there seems to be a demand. So yes, years ago, a lawyer that follows me on Facebook created a contract for her son and using a smartphone. It went over it was awesome. And so when I asked that, I thought, you know what, let me create something. So I created as a result of the demand from the parents who follow on Facebook. So what I did was, and if you want to copy this contract, all you need to do is go to my Facebook page, and just type in Paul Davis tips all together, and scroll down to about 3 weeks ago from the date of this podcast, and you'll see the link to the contract. What I did was I not only created the social media contract, but I created a post about what happens before social media. Also the cell phone contract from years ago. So there's a bunch of resources. And the social media contract was very specific. And the reason I created a contract is because life is about contracts. You know it, and I know it. You sign a contract when you start a job. Are you a professional athlete? You're signing a contract. Are you leasing a car? You're signing a contract. And when you break contracts, there are consequences, right? So that's why I like the structure of a contract, which is we're teaching kids at a young age, like, here are the terms by which you will use a certain platform. If you choose to violate those terms, which you agreed to and you signed off on, there are going to be consequences. So I made it very simple. You could, when I was thinking about this, you could come up with literally 100 different points. And if parents, oh, by the way, a little side note, the best part about this contract, it's completely modifiable. So I will always have the original, but you can modify it as you wish because it's a Word file. And the other thing is, it wasn't just from the mind of Paul Davis. I created what's called the core, but then I asked for feedback from parents, a few law enforcement friends, social workers, youth workers, and a couple of teachers. So I got all their feedback before I published what I call the final product, but I tried to keep it very simple and maybe 14 points or less, the key components of it. Because these are young kids, they're 13, 14, 15. We want to make it simple. If parents want to add on to it, by all means. But at the very least, the core of what I created will allow them to establish a foundation of, look, it is a privilege for you to have this. And I, as a parent who care about you and who loves you, will make sure that you respect these rules in an effort to keep you safe online. So it's not a parent saying, do this or else. Like I said, they can modify certain words and certain points if they like, but it's to basically establish a foundation, a framework, if you will, for how it will be used, so there are little to no problems. Are there always going to be issues with social media? Of course there are. But if you can establish that foundation, you will greatly reduce risk and problems as a result of misuse of social media. And it's simple. And the rules are basic, but they're going to be firm. And that's why in the part of the contract, I don't know if you saw it, here are the consequences should you fail to abide by it. So, and I
this
left it
is what
blank.
I want to interject right here, Paul, because I
Right.
have an idea. I got an idea. I'm going to go through bits of the contract, and I want you to, to expand on it, because I think that the people who are listening right now might not have seen the contract, or people that are watching. So I'll put out some points that are in the contract, and then you can just expand, and I can add my bits on it. The thing that I think is going to be the most difficult is the parents, and I have caught myself here too. I'm going to say the leash got really long during the pandemic when it came to many things, right? But let's just talk about, since we're talking about social media and we're talking about technology, it got long for many reasons because things were shut down, and there was also the lack of capacity to have that argument over and over again. So I think the leash got long, and now we are back to, this past summer was full blown summer. Everything's good. Everything's open. And now you've got to reel in that, for lack of a better word, that leash that got long, you've got to make it shorter. You've got to say, no, these are the rules, and this is the structure. I know I let things slide during the pandemic. I was really choosing my battles, and maybe I didn't choose that one, but now this is really important. And I think having that structure is helpful for the parent. And then also for the parent to say, it is also okay that sometimes you struggle holding the contract in your mind, but not verbally out loud. So in our minds, because I think that a lot of the times we can go to a place of, oh, well, maybe just this time. Okay. Oh no, maybe I'll just, because that's what we've maybe done the last 2 years plus during the pandemic. And now it's like, we have to reprogram our minds to say, nope, this is going to be a structure that needs to be followed, because there's going to be huge benefits with safety. And I expect my kid is going to push back, and they're going to have emotions about it. And I'm going to have emotions. And sometimes I'm going to find it hard to hold the boundary. But this is what I say. And I've said this before in a podcast, and this helps me a lot because I'm a parent of an 11-year-old. I have definitely moments where it's hard to hold a boundary because you're like, oh, can I go through this emotional conflict? I take a deep breath and I say, their disappointment's not my guilt.
Right. I've heard you say that. I love it.
And then I also like when somebody else can also hold me accountable, can say, whoa, Sarah, I thought that this was your plan, and now you're allowing that. So if you have a partner, if you have a family member, a friend, where you can check in and be like, oh, today was really hard. There was a lot of pushback when it came to holding them accountable to this social media, but I know it's important, but I did struggle. Those are good conversations to have with someone who can hold you accountable.
I agree.
So for all the parents out there, it's a journey, but it's an important one. So let's start with number 1, Paul. It says, and I brought it right up on my phone, your contract. Says,
can I just interrupt you, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely.
To our audience, this is what's called a curveball, because Sarah and I never script our podcast. And she never told me, hey, Paul, I'm reading your contract on air. So this is a curveball. This is an audible for the football analogy. Sarah, go.
Okay, we won't do the whole thing. I won't give away all the goods.
All right.
We'll just do a little bit, which is I will only have social media platforms that my parents have approved.
Yep.
Love this one. I think this is an essential one, because can we just go through, Paul, naming some of the most popular social media platforms and ones that you think are safer or better than others?
The top 3 for teenagers: TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram. I was doing a pre-interview today for a radio show I'm doing this week on CBC, and the interviewer asked me, "What do you find interesting when parents when you talk to parents about social media, like in terms of their reactions?" I said, "The one thing I find fascinating is that most parents put social media under an umbrella, meaning it's all the same, and it is absolutely not. When you look at how TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram are used, they're all used vastly different. Yes, they're called social media platforms, which they are,
Mhm.
but they have different components on usage. So when you look at consumption wise, primarily TikTok, video based. Communication, Snapchat. Instagram, combination of pictures, videos, and communication. So the one thing parents have to understand is that they're all different. So the reason that first point was made was to say, which platform do you intend on using? And I
Mhm.
need to understand why you're using it. So if your child tells you, hey, I'm 14, I'm allowed to have Snapchat because I'm over 13, but although parents make the final decision, well, they're probably saying it because it's the primary communication tool amongst Gen Z, bottom and millennials, and regretfully, even Alpha. And Alpha is not even allowed to be on Snapchat.
Now,
But
what
it's
age is Alpha right
I
now?
believe Alpha was what's in our school right now. I have to get the exact date, but definitely elementary school kids.
So my son is 11.
He's an Alpha.
Yes. So he just literally, I before this podcast, he's like, "So, mom, about Snapchat."
Oh, you're talking to that guy, huh? Which means, all right, another
He's
2
like,
years.
"Snapchat is not that bad. Really, it's not like it's amazing." Snapchat seems to be the thing I personally hear about from my son.
Yeah, because it is the primary communication tool. Now, it's way more than that. But if you look at how teens communicate, the core of it's through Snapchat. So when I created that first line is, I need parents to be absolutely aware of the platforms because by default, a teen will want TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat. They'll create accounts. They'll create the same username for the accounts. They'll tell everyone where they are. Some might go to Twitter. Some may have Facebook because Facebook is very relevant for a teenager in other parts of the world because of connecting with family. So there are many different platforms. Parents need to understand which one and they need to approve it based on how their child will consume it. And I tell parents, at the very most, make it 2 platforms. I start off with 1, but make it 2 and then you cap it right there. They don't need 3, 4, 5, 6 social media platforms at that age. So that is point number 1. So parents are aware, I got it. This is what you're using. This is what I will educate myself on moving forward.
Wondering, I know I'm kind of going a sidebar here, but what are your thoughts on TikTok?
It's a whole episode in itself, Sarah.
Okay. So
You
next
know,
episode just on TikTok.
it's it can be a wonderful time killer with the right security in place at the right age.
Mm-hmm.
Do I recommend it for anyone under 15? No. It's the number one hypersexualization platform for little kids. Privacy, I would never put TikTok on a smartphone that has your personal data. So for me to elaborate on all that literally requires a separate podcast.
Right, right,
It's one of those, yeah, I will accept it at a certain age with privacy, but definitely not for a 10-year-old for sure.
right. No, and that actually, even that bit that you said brings a lot of good knowledge and clarity.
Yeah.
I do like in the contract, and like I said, I'm not going to go through verbatim. I mean, people have to get it from you. But I do like that you mention about passwords because I have talked to people, even adults, that have the same password for everything.
Blows me away
And I
to
think
this day.
yes, and we're becoming, and if you think about how we're raising our kids now in this very technology-based world, there's a lot of natural trust that they have in the technology. I know this, my mom says this to me all the time. So my mom's in her 70s, right? So she'll be like, "Nope, you don't, Sarah, you're trusting that too much." And she's right. Like there's certain things that I'm just so used to, but then if I look at my son, there's going to be certain things he's so used to. So I love
Right.
that you clarified, how the password should be, that there should be a copy that the parents have. I think that is very important information that needs to be addressed.
So
with your child.
it's okay. So one of the golden rules, especially for younger kids, is that parents must have every password written down in a book. If a child ever changes a password, they need to update that book. And I will get pushback. Why? Okay, number one, you are responsible for your child, and not acknowledging what their passwords are isn't isn't helping keep your child safe should something go wrong. Number two, it could be used in case of an emergency. I have too many examples. And in
Right.
fewer examples, but still examples, Sarah, it could literally be life-saving. And I've got 3 examples of where it was life-saving for a teenager because the parents had access to a child's password,
Right.
which led to that child being good today.
Yes.
So I want parents not to feel guilt, because you will have parents who will say, what about my child's privacy? Get over that. They're a child. Their password is your password for the sake of safety. At 16, 17, 18, of course, it's their password. Give them privacy. Don't try and convince me that you should not have your 12-year-old child's password to their phone, to their social media account. Well, they're not allowed
Mhm.
social media at 12, to their email account, and when they're 13, to their social media account. Please stop with that argument. It's getting very old, and it's how kids fall through the cracks. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Do you find that some parents are afraid?
Yes,
Hmm.
and
Like
that's
they're
where
afraid to have that conversation and conflict and hold that boundary with their preteen or teen.
I don't know if they're afraid to have the conversation. Some of them that approach me said, well, and they'll do this one on one. They'll say, what about my child's privacy? And that tells you right away they're concerned about the conversation, and they're concerned about how their child will respond when they say, well, I need passwords to your devices. And I'll give you a perfect example. A parent saw me in the province of Alberta, whose one of their children saw me, but one is a year older and was out of that school, didn't see. So the kid who saw me knew what was going to happen that night. And parent came, kid saw me. The other child didn't. And the result of what happened, when the parent went home and made some changes with the other child, wasn't very positive, because the child immediately went to, you're invading my privacy, you don't respect me, on and on and on. And the dad's like, how come you get it and when you're different, that's because they didn't hear the presentation.
Right.
And they were basically blindsided by it, because all this time they were given quote unquote privacy in their bedroom by themselves, door closed, no password sharing, and then everything changed. This is fundamentally important, that parents have the passwords to their children's online accounts.
Yes. And here's the other way of looking at it. So the child's interpreting it as, you don't respect me because now you're changing the thing that I really, really liked. I liked this privacy, and I saw that as a sign of respect and independence.
Mhm.
How about the parent coming back with, I respect you so much, since it's my job to keep you safe, this is what is going to happen. And I know it didn't happen before. And I know that I'm switching things on you, but this is what I have to do. And you won't see the benefit of it until you're 22 years old.
Well, that's the one thing I tell parents all the time, is that your child will not appreciate this until later on. And when you
Oh, for
hear from
sure they
your
won't. For
when
sure
you
they
hear
won't.
from your child, you hate me, you don't love me, you don't trust me, just remember that they're interpreting that as, you love me. And it's amazing how many
Mhm.
smiles I will actually see in a parent's face when I say that face to face, because they know that I am giving them real life data. That's how we
Yes.
responded to our parents. But now we knew that what they did meant that they loved us, and that's why they did it. So it's now in the tech world where, you don't love me, you hate me, you don't trust. Yeah, that means I love you. So it's
And
just,
I want to say something, Paul, that is going to go right in with what you're saying before we move on.
yeah.
I had a grade 7 girl come up to me, and she said to me, my mom is weak. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, you know how there's rules, and well, I can break them, and she'll talk to me and then say that there's a consequence, but just I can talk my way out of it, never follow through. And I thought in that moment, oh my goodness, every parent needs to hear this, because I know for sure that that mom thought what she was doing was rationalizing with her
Right.
and being reasonable and
Right.
saying, "Oh, okay, you talked your way out of it. I get you get it, so I don't have to follow through with that consequence." But she's interpreting as, I can run the show. I can
Yep.
just say what I want and do what I want, and that is that kindness that the mom is seeing it as is now being perceived as a weakness. Like, there is no structure, there is no boundary, and if there is one, I can just talk my way out of it. And I thought, for even for myself, that was a big wake up call, because I thought there's been even times for myself where I've allowed a boundary and a structure that I really believe is important in a moment of maybe exhaustion, not wanting to hold the boundary because there's conflict and emotions, and where you're just like, okay, fine, do it. Or when you think, oh, well, they're being really reasonable and rational with their words. I mean, yeah, well, maybe it is okay. That, and you almost find yourself thinking that that boundary maybe doesn't need to be there until afterwards.
Right.
And you're like, okay, no, that I did need to hold that, and that's on me. And I think that can be a tough part of not just parenting, but life. When I talk to, and this can even be corporately, adults, boundaries are very difficult for people to hold, especially when it comes to family in general. Boundaries with in-laws, boundaries with siblings, boundaries with work life. Like, people find boundaries difficult.
Yep.
So it doesn't surprise me that that's why we have a lot of parents finding it very difficult to hold a boundary of social media, because it's not just here in life where boundaries is hard. It's multiple places,
Correct. Yeah.
but
And
has to be done.
I'm hoping that this will assist in formulating those boundaries, and so it assists the parents with, I don't know what the words I'm looking for, with making sure they don't have a sense of guilt or that they'll crumble, because they can always reflect back on, you agreed to this, right? Because I get it. I hear you. So,
well, you know what we should do? We should do a support group, boundary support group for parents. Social media, that's what you do. And then we could all get online, like, oh my gosh, I did it today. I did it. I nailed it. It was hard, but and then other days I'm like, okay, I totally blew it. So let's just get back. I think that what the contract also does is allows you to have a focal point to redirect to. So when you do fall off track, even as a parent, instead of beating yourself up, take a breath and say, no, this is my end result. This is the contract. We agreed to it. And yes, there's going to be days that are going to be easier for you to follow the contract, and days that are going to be harder, but that's okay. At least we have an end result in mind, and there's clarity to it.
yes. Yes.
The other thing that I really liked that you did is you talked about images and the importance of what you post. And I read this out loud to Kai about specifically Snapchat, where it's like nothing's delete. Like, even if it goes away after 3 or 5, 11 seconds, it's still there.
Mm-hmm. The one component of my grade 7 to 12 presentation, which deals with Snapchat, breaks down technically how Snapchat works. And when I break it down to students, that aha moment kicks in, because they are led to believe it's gone. And that's why inclusive of my message is what you see behind me, which is the internet never forgets. That blends into Snapchat. They think it's gone. It's not. Now, when a student hears that, traditionally from parents or educators, they get the eye roll. What do you know? You're just a parent. When the cyber guy comes in and defines it, all of a sudden now I've validated the parent and the educator saying, oh yeah, you are right. But the one thing I find fascinating about kids, they don't, obviously, they don't like being told what to do. But when when it's defined to them, and they realize, okay, he didn't lie, he didn't exaggerate, he gave me some facts, that I get it now. So
Right.
They're disappointed in that they believed the lies of images disappearing. So although on the contract it states you will acknowledge that images do not delete, I actually have to prove it to them. So um, it's stated that they don't go away after 3, 5, 7, 10 seconds, but eventually, if they hear me in a presentation, they'll be like, "Got it. I signed that contract. It was stated there. You just validated it, so it actually reinforces the fact that I agreed to that because now I understand." So yes, it is a bit complex, but once they get it, they realize and they'll make better choices using Snapchat because it is the most misused platform out there. But if they understand it and they agreed to, I know that images don't delete, even though it may have to be proven to them, they'll make better choices.
And I love that in this contract, you've given lots of valuable information and insight that I think us parents don't even know. So I definitely think if you're listening to this podcast, you're watching it, you have to check out the contract. It is something that I'm going to be going through when Kai's of age for sure. He'll be like, your friend Paul.
Sarah, let me just prepare you. When you bring up my name, expect a very innocent eye roll, like not him again. His name in my house again. So yeah, expect the eye roll, and that's cool. I love to hear the stories from parents who say, "Paul, I brought up your name. I got the eye roll." That's great. You know why? Because they know it's for a good reason, and they know that you're right. They don't like that.
And you're doing it for protection. Look at how many people that you have not only made a difference for, but that have called you, and parents have called you and said, whoa, we actually didn't take your advice, or we didn't hear your advice, and now there is an issue, and you've been there to support and add clarity and accountability. And so people know you're also going to be helpful. You're not doing it to be hindering. You're there to help.
Sarah, in the world we live in, you can take any message and spin it any way you wish for the purpose of influence, for the purpose of monetization, whatever. Every message can be spun the way you believe will benefit you. I take data and I deliver it to assist the family. So people see me as a passionate individual. That's because I'm talking about a topic that impacts way too many people. When you speak passionately because you speak about a topic that will help people. So you have to separate beliefs from data. And when you deliver data, obviously with our expertise, people are receptive to it. And they're like, all right, he's not reading a script. He's not looking at a computer and talking to me and saying goodbye. When they feel you and they're feeling you based on, again, data, not hypothetical and potential and maybe and might, they're more receptive to it. Now, if someone chooses not to listen, and it's happened, and they ask for help, I've always been there. Always. Recently I had a parent say, thank you. What can I offer you in terms of compensation? I said, nothing. Have I helped you? Tremendously. I said, make a contribution to the hospital for sick kids. You know what? If you feel like giving, go. I've never taken money from a parent for helping them with a serious situation. I've consulted parents. Yeah, there's compensation for that because that's a consultation. But when parents have reached out, never, ever once. But if they feel they have to, donate to your favorite charity. My objective is to make sure that kid is in a better place and they're being helped. And that comes from, again, the data, knowing how to fix the problem. And so that's part of what I love, is I can take my knowledge and experience. And although parents may not like some of the messaging because it is so fact-based that it goes against their traditional values or beliefs, they know that if they apply it, it actually will work because the data is all there. So
no, well, and that's a valid point. Right? When it's there, it's in front of you. It's like, okay, well, what are you going to dispute? Here it is.
Exactly.
And I love that the end piece of the whole contract, that, there's many pieces, but you mentioned this in the beginning, and I think we have to go back to it before we end, which is, here's the contract. You're signing it. We're talking about it. So this is creating wonderful discussions, and we're acknowledging, we're maybe even having some disputes about things. Like we're revving up the engines. We're getting the conversation that needs to happening with these bullet points and these contract that you have. And then the end is what's going to be the consequence, right? So right choices have consequences. So if there's something you're choosing not to do, what you said you're going to do, there's a natural consequence just in the world.
Right.
So teaching kids that there's accountability.
Yeah.
That's massive.
And the best part was I left it blank so that I'm not going to let the child decide what the consequence is, but the parents are going to write it in with the child acknowledging, yeah, okay, that's the consequence if I break this rule. So it's not, here's the contract, sign it. If you break it, here are my consequences. So it's not negotiation, but it's acknowledgement that we've created this consequence, which you agreed to. Should you choose?
And you know it.
Exactly. It's not a surprise. And so I left that blank. I think I left 2 or 3 lines where parents could fill it in, just because, you know what, it shouldn't just be one, it could be multiple. You know what I mean? If, for example, you're driving a car on the highway, you're speeding, it could be stunt driving, it could be speeding, it could be, so there could be multiple consequences as a result of breaking, whatever the case is.
Right.
So I let parents fill that in. But quick side story about the conversation, because I believe it's important. I love you brought up. The day I released that contract, a mother downloaded it and showed it to her daughter. Her daughter was upset. But her daughter and the mother were at the beach somewhere. And I said, you read a contract, because she DM'd me right away on Facebook. My daughter's rolling her eyes, telling me I'm overexaggerating. I said, perhaps the beach wasn't the best place to share that you have a new contract in place. Like, you know,
timing matters.
Exactly. Go home, say, hey, got a new contract from that guy that you love so much. And here we're going to go through it one by one. If it would have been delivered, perhaps at the dinner table, perhaps after dinner while you're sitting on the couch, the response would be completely different. But this child was probably at the beach having fun, thinking, here, I'm getting this, that. All of a sudden, mom says, contract, we're going to do this. I think it threw the child off. And so that's why I love reading the messaging. I said, perhaps it wasn't the best time to introduce it, maybe later on, and not ruin your beach day, right? Because it is going to disrupt some homes. But if you deliver it effectively, and like Sarah said, every piece of the contract is a talking point, it will be much, much smoother in its delivery and its acceptance.
Yes. The point that I think that is really important too for us parents to walk away with is, even if you did not implement these rules and now you're thinking, well, how do I go back? Also saying that to your kids, saying, look, I know I let this happen before, but this is what I know now. And again, it doesn't mean you're not going to get pushback. Actually, you absolutely are. I remember lots of things that my mom had me do when I was growing up, going to character building classes. And after my parents divorced, she was like, you need to get more into leadership and all these different mindset trainings of working through emotions. And I was always like, I'm not going to that. I don't need to go to that. And I'd have a full-on tantrum. You know what my mom would say to me? You can choose the pants you wear, but you can't choose whether you go or not.
Right.
I'm dropping you off. And I'd be like kicking and screaming. Now when I look back, I think, wow, she really cared.
Yep.
Because she could have just said, oh, okay, fine. You're throwing too much of a tantrum. I can't take this anymore. And Paul, I did a lot of research at risk youth center. This is going back years and years and years ago. Sorry, not research, a lot of volunteer work. And it ended, well, it was really good knowledge. But one of the things that he was about, I would say 18, said to me, one of the youth said, I had a teacher in high school that I gave the hardest time to. And now when I look back, that was the teacher that cared the most because they held me accountable.
Right.
Couldn't stand it at the time, pushed back, called them every name in the book, yelled. And he said, and now when I look back, that teacher actually cared.
Yep.
So you couldn't see it at the time, but now looking back. So I think we're not just parenting for today, we're parenting for the future. We're not just doing this social media structure and contract for today, we're doing it for the future of our kids that are going to grow up in a world where tech is only becoming more and more apparent.
Right.
Teaching them how to use it and how to be accountable to it is so important. And there was a grade 8 girl that came up to me a couple years ago, and she said, I know that you're on Instagram because I know my friends have seen you on Instagram. She's like, but I don't have any social media. My parents won't let me. And she whispered to me, she's like, I used to be mad about it. Now I'm so happy. She's like, because there's good things, but there's also a lot of drama that my friends experience that I don't. And I was like, okay, again, another wise word from the youth.
For all the parents listening, what Sara just stated in terms of that story, I've heard countless times from students who don't have what they once wanted because their parents said no, and now are thankful because exactly what Sara said, too much drama, too much keeping up, too much fear of missing out. And every kid who's ever approached me at high school, of course, because now they've matured a little bit, none of them were upset. They were at one point, they got it, they understood it, and now they're in a better place as a result. So I hear that all the time. So for the parents who feel their kids will be disappointed, you know what? It's for the now. And I do want to say something, because you addressed something earlier about how will kids respond, perhaps the parents change the rules. I get asked this question if I tell you twice a week. I'm not exaggerating.
Mm-hmm.
I tell parents this. Every day as a parent, we learn. I am an expert in this field. I'm magical. But I'm not the best dad when it comes to everything else. And so I've learned, and I've adjusted my parenting skills. I've learned from Sara Westbrook certain phrases that I taught my daughters, which I didn't know before I'd met Sara. But listening to what Sara has taught me and listening to her has made me a better dad in a certain area. When other individuals are listening, I'm like, you know what, I could do that better. I will go and make changes, and my daughters will see the change and say, you know what, I kind of messed up. I didn't think of that thoroughly, but I learned I'm being better. So parents, yes, you're allowed to make the changes. The kids are allowed to be upset, but you're doing it because you just learned, and we're learning every day. Hopefully, that's the way we summarize this in a positive manner.
And I love that you just said that, because there's certain things that I know from you that I have learned and thought, you know what, Sara, you can't go back into the past of like worrying that you didn't know this before. You know it now, and now do something with it. And you so eloquently nailed that, because I think all of us parents, I know myself included, need to remember it's not about perfection. It's not about being the perfect parent. Our kids don't need us to be the perfect parent, but it is reflection and redirection. So if we can reflect, right? If we can reflect and say, oh, shoot, I didn't know what I didn't know, but now I'm going to redirect because this is important, and I'm going to make it important, even with the pushback.
Yep.
Deep breath. Their disappointment is not my guilt. Knowing that when they say, I don't like you, I hate you, they're saying, I don't like the boundary, but they still love you.
Right. The end.
The end. But Paul, thank you so much for doing the contract, for making it available. People need to definitely check it out, use it, and have those conversations.
I'm almost at 4,000 downloads. I'm pretty blown away by that. I didn't think it would be that. It is. I'm happy to share it. And boy, do we have more to talk about. But until next time, everyone, thank you for listening, because this is what we know.
Bye.
Bye.